Welcome to the Paywall Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. That's Travis Bembenek from the MexicoNewsDaily.com. Welcome, Travis. Really great to have you here. You're the publisher and CEO, and you ready to talk some publishing success?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Pete.
Welcome to the Paywall Podcast, where we discuss paywalls and paywall strategies for news and magazine publishers. This episode of the Paywall Podcast is brought to you by Leaky Paywall. Leaky Paywall is the most flexible WordPress subscription platform. Find out more at leakypaywall.com. And now for today's episode.
All right, so I have a bunch of stuff to talk to you here about. But the first thing I want to do for our listeners is hear what do you guys, Mexico News Daily, what do you guys publish? What is your content and who is your listener?
Sure. So Mexico News Daily is the source of news and information in English about Mexico, right? So my wife and I, having spent a lot of time doing business and enjoying Mexico as tourists and now ultimately living here, we're always frustrated at the narrative that the media had about Mexico, right? We believe it's a wonderful place. And yet the media, if you read an article, in the US or Canada or Europe about Mexico, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be negative, right? And there are negative things that do happen in this country. There is violence in some areas. There is a cartel issue, but there's so much more to the country than that. And so our inspiration in purchasing Mexico News Daily, and we've owned it for 3.5 years now, was to provide a balanced and complete perspective on the country that we felt was so missing. So today we have now over 1 million readers a month coming in to our site. And ironically, despite there being 2 million Americans and Canadians living in Mexico, 80% of our readers are outside of Mexico. So about 60% of our views on a typical day are in the United States, 10% are in Canada, and then about 10% are in Asia and Europe. So there really is a lot of interest in Mexico around the world for good quality, not sensationalist news.
So if you were to segment your core reader, geographically, it sounds like that's not really the target since they're all over the place.
Right.
Is there anything else sort of in their profile that makes them likely to pay for a subscription?
Sure. So, if you think of a couple different segments of people who are interested in Mexico, right? You've got, as I said, the 2 million people living here, right? So these are people that are, actually live in the country, that are from Canada or the US. Then you've got, in a typical year, over 30 million people travel to Mexico. So they may travel here on business, they may travel on vacation, but over 30 million people are coming to this country every year on trips. And then you have, this whole group of people, and it's getting bigger every day, that are just more and more interested in Mexico to potentially live, right? So it may be people nearing retirement. It may be people a little ways from retirement, but are looking to have a second home. And we're even finding it's a lot of families just looking to provide their family and their kids an alternative environment to grow up in from where they are living today.
And what makes you think, what do you think is the number one reason for them willing to pay you for content? Because you guys are almost, and I could be wrong here, 100% reader revenue
Yeah,
organization.
we eliminated all advertising, not only from our website, but also from our newsletters. So to answer your question, again, I think a lot of people around the world are getting turned off on, media. And if you ask, well, why is that? Right? A big part of that, I think, is because media has brought it upon themselves, right? Media is so political, so opinionated, and it's really brought about, sort of an anxiety about reading the news. And so what we do differently is, first of all, we are not politically leaning in either direction, in either Mexico or the US or Canada. So we're a little
Mm.
bit sort of back to old school journalism where we just present the news, right? So we say, this is what happened. Here's what one political party says. Here's what the other one says. And then we allow our readers to make that choice for themselves. The other thing is, we have no sponsored content either, right? So even not having ads, we're approached all the time by people saying, hey, will you write about our hotel or about,
Mm.
whatever? We don't do any of that. And so I think we've really created an environment where people trust us, right? They trust us that we're not trying to push our opinions on them. And they trust our objectivity when it comes to just, telling you what's going on in the country and talking about, what there is to see and do here.
Yeah, that's a great word, trust. I'm glad you said that. I mean, that is, I think, the power of publishers who are doing it right, right? Like if, whether it's local news or regional or whatever, if you're not catering to advertisers like big media
Yeah.
tends to do, and you're actually catering to your readers, that builds the trust, and that's why they give you money. Bottom line, if
Yeah,
your
and I mean,
content
my
is
wife
good, they
and
give
I
you money.
said that, we didn't buy this business to sell more Viagra and more toenail fungus cream, right? And those tended to be the ads that
Yeah.
that popped up on our site, and I'm kind of joking, but um, it just ruined the reader experience,
Mm.
and I felt like you have to pick a path. You either are going to try to make money because of the quality and trustworthiness of your content, or you're going to try to make money through ads, right? And the
Right.
problem, the trap you fall into then with ads is, you start chasing, and to grow your revenue on the ad side, you have to annoy your reader more and more, right? Pop-up ads and draggers
Yeah.
and cryptocurrency things, and it's not what we were trying to do, with this project.
I love it. Speaking my language. Um, so you had mentioned that you bought the publication. Before I talk about the success you've had with reader revenue, I want to just jump into the crazy thing you did, I think during COVID, right? You and Tamana were working corporate jobs and you decided to buy a news site. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I have no experience in the journalism industry, or but I have read. I've been a kind of crazy reader of news my whole life. And when I say crazy, I mean a couple hours a day, multiple different news sites. So my wife and I have traveled a lot. We've been in the corporate world. And, I think to be good in the corporate world, you gotta be up on top of global
Mm,
news. So we always had
mhm,
this passion for news. But yeah, we were living in the Chicago area, corporate jobs, and sort of wondering what we wanted to do for the next chapter in life. We didn't want to just be in large companies our whole life, working for them. We didn't know what we wanted to do yet. And as we were going through that thinking process, COVID came. And we thought we spent time talking, but as I said, we had spent a lot of time in advance, and we said maybe this is the time. This is the time to actually take that leap of faith without a clear path of what to do yet. And so we both left the corporate world and moved to Mexico. Right at the beginning of COVID, and so yeah, we didn't have Mexico News Daily yet when we
mhm,
when we left our jobs. And
mhm.
as we were living in Mexico and taking the time during the rough, first few months of COVID about what do we want to do, we aligned on the fact that we wanted to do something impactful for Mexico, and we thought helping shape the narrative on the country to be more positive, more optimistic, more realistic would be a great thing for the country to bring more people, more investment. And
Mm.
then we also thought, being passionate readers of media and also really horrified at what was happening with the media, and we really saw it clear during the pandemic, where not only the country was getting divided, but states, communities, school districts, families. And we said, well, what if we could be part of the solution and what the media is supposed to be, which is encouraging information gathering and knowledge seeking and getting smarter, and not just getting angrier. And that led
Mm.
us to call the current owner of Mexico News Daily. We were already readers of it, but we said maybe we should call him up and meet him and find out what's going on. And after a few conversations, I just asked him straight out. I said, "Would you ever consider selling it?" And the rest is history.
Wow, you cold called that. That's
It was a
amazing.
cold call. I was actually on the
Wow.
street outside on my cell phone, and the first call we had, and
Wow.
that's how it all started.
That's awesome. Okay. That's quite a leap of faith. I love it. Mission based.
New
So
country, new business, new industry. Yep.
yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. My wife and I moved to New Hampshire from Boston with that mentality. She quit her job. I moved the business and we just said, let's do it because we want it to be where we want it to be.
Yeah.
And it worked out. So what so when you acquired Mexico News Daily, what kind of state was it in? How different was it back then than it is today?
Well, I mean, it had had a Trump bump and COVID bump, so
Mm,
that was helping, but it was definitely in decline. It was in pretty serious decline. And I think the owner had become overly reliant on um, you know, on advertising. And I
mm,
also think, and this is not a paid plug for Leaky, but the owner had a paywall service that was crippling the business,
mm,
absolutely crippling the business. And I just think it was just, that he was losing his sort of one desire and willingness to keep doing this every day. And so I
mm,
think I called at the right time. So it was not doing well in terms of new subscribers. It was not doing well in terms of
mm,
traffic trends, and it was becoming overly reliant on advertising. That being
mm.
said, like I said, there had been sort of a life preserver, with COVID, as many news services, experienced, and then, Trump as well was good for the media industry.
Right. How did you know to go the dump advertising, change and lean into paid subscriptions?
Well, again, my wife and I have a combined 50 years of global business experience, so we've seen a lot of what works and what doesn't work, and we just took it from a customer perspective. We did day one, we eliminated at least half the ads.
Mm,
These literally the owner had gotten into this trap where, you click on an article and the first thing that appeared was an ad, right? And then,
right.
or these ads that would drag along with you. And so immediately we, day one, eliminated those. So it just had an immediate, and those were the most profitable ads, as you can imagine. But we went with our experience and our gut and just said, from our own experience, it's a horrible reading experience, especially on a small cell phone when those ads are popping up. It's horrible. And so, we literally day one eliminated about half the ads. And I said to the team, our goal is to get to a position where we can eliminate all ads. And I think they thought, we were crazy when we said that, or it would never happen. And it took us about 2 years. And then we eliminated everything. We just said, that's it. Um, so,
That's amazing.
really, if you ask me, well, do you think your readers appreciate that as much as you want them to? Probably not, but I mean, if you look at some of the best newspapers in the world, they have ads, right? And sometimes they're pretty annoying. I mean, a New York Times article will have 10 ads
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if they appreciate it as much as we want them to, but what we do know is when you read Mexico News Daily, if you're free or paid, it's a nice experience, right? So the other model so many people go with is, well, why don't you just put ads on your free people? And again, I have a hard time in my head believing you can lure someone to pay
Right.
by having an annoying experience and telling them, if you pay us, we won't annoy you. I just, I think that's maybe a benefit I have of not being from the industry. I'm not cynical enough yet. Because, but I think, telling someone, pay me to not annoy you isn't a good value proposition. I want
Boy,
it to be pay us because we give you a lot of value.
I
So
got to bring you along to talk to other publishers because that is the battle today where, and I mean, you see this, we see this all the time. You, you, you hit the site, like you said, there's a pop-up of some kind, right? You have to get rid of it. Then there's another pop-up and then the ads are sliding in and all of a sudden you're treating the visitor as the enemy instead
mhm,
of as a
mhm,
friend.
yeah.
And when it comes to converting paid subscriptions, you really gotta, like you said, you gotta really make the experience a good
Yeah.
experience. That's
Well, it's
cool.
not
All right.
easy, right? I mean, it takes
No, no.
craziness, or I don't know what the word is, but patience, right? And just believe in your product. And we just work so hard to
Yeah.
to improve the product and differentiate our content to the point where we felt comfortable that people would recognize that.
Not everyone has your confidence though. I mean, just speaking
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
you know, thousands of publishers, like
But maybe
confident.
publishers will say, "Oh, give him 5 more years in the industry and he's gonna be, putting more pop-up ads," who knows? But it's working for us, and we're 100% committed to what we're doing. So,
Cool. Well, let's talk about that in a minute. But next segue is let's talk about the success you've had with paid subscriptions. So now we've known each other for at least a couple of years. I don't know how
mhm,
long it's been. Um, what I do know, and I'm not going to reveal any numbers or anything, but I do
not even
know
my parents know them, so I hope you won't.
no, no. But I do know that three things have really grown for you in the last couple of years. One is website traffic, which sounds a little crazy when you put up, a paywall and
Mm,
it's like you're actually walling people up, but through the newsletter groove, your traffic has grown, your email list has grown,
mhm,
and your paid subscriptions have grown.
mhm.
And as far as I can say, I'll just use the word, you've had a lot of success doing it. So can you give our listeners an idea of how you got there? How did what do you do? What's the funnel look like? And how are you converting visitors all the way into paid subscribers?
Sure, and I don't claim to have all the answers yet. I mean, one thing I love about what we're doing is every day I feel like we have kind of limitless things we can do to get better. And so we just keep getting better every day at what we're doing. And really, we did have a falling knife business when we got it. So I mean, our number of paid subscribers was literally falling off a cliff when we bought it. And so that was stressful, as you can imagine. And really the first it my wife and I have owned it for almost 3.5 years now. To simplify it, I'd say the first year we focused on the back office. It was just messy. The sort of behind the scenes on the site was really messy. Then we focused on the user experience. Again, eliminating ads, cleaning up
Mm-hmm.
the site, adding categories that made sense. And now, over the last year or so, and it's accelerating. And this year, we're really going to lean in more to sort of the marketing. We've spent not a penny on marketing, on anything yet, but we feel like, we are just increasingly working to understand our customers and what they want and what they need and what they can't get from social media, right? Or Substack,
Mm.
right? I mean, we talk about that all day, every day, because people say all the time, well, what is your competition? And, you could say, I mean, everything, right? I mean, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And you could then say, well, Substack. And, in our case, you could say, any think tank that puts out content on Mexico or government entity. I mean, we have infinite amount of competition. But you can also say, so how do we find that space where, we have something unique and differentiated? And again, a lot of corporate experience and a lot of customer and marketing experience has just, gets us, we're fanatical about it. How just each and every single day we're talking about how do we differentiate? What do we give our customers? And we try to be really in tune with what's going on in the world. So we're cognizant of the fact that if we cover the US Mexico trade argument, Trump has been putting tariffs on Mexico. If we just cover that every single day, it'll get clicks, but people are going to get tired of it, right? And so we have to be thinking, how do we balance that with lighter content or content that makes people laugh or smile or inspires them? And so we are, and it sounds like a cliche, but we are just razor focused on what do our customers want to read and how do they want to read it.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of times talking to some other publishers, it's really more about what they want to write and what they want to put out there. And I think, again, not being from the industry, I think has given us a little bit of a benefit of just being way more sort of customer focused to do that.
Getting the content right.
Yeah.
Okay. So from the content, so you sharpened up the content. Let's talk about the funnel. So walk me through the experience a visitor from social media or Google search gets to be a paid subscriber at the end of the line.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Um,
about, using I mean, we get a good chunk of our traffic directly to our site. We get a good chunk of our traffic through sites like Google. Still, we haven't seen a
mm,
drop off there.
mm,
And the previous owner had not put really any emphasis on social media. We've put, I would say, a light touch on social media because we just have yet to see, and again, we've only done a light touch, but we just have not seen conversion from social media to our site, right? Or even traffic, right? It's awareness, and that's why we're doing it. But as far as someone seeing something on social media and then going to our site, it's a pretty loose connection there. And
mm.
and and so we on the site, we have a paywall after a couple articles every 30 days. And then, people can sign up for a free newsletter that we have. And we have a morning newsletter that's more topic. So one day it may be about articles about business in Mexico, or one day it may be about Mexico City tourism articles. And then we have an evening newsletter that has, the day's news. And so, through those newsletters, we're obviously, once we've gotten them, getting this free newsletter, we try to, encourage them and inspire them to want to pay us to see all our content.
Would you say the newsletter is an important tool in the toolbox?
Oh, of course, absolutely. And I mean, I think we're in just our initial phases of getting the most out of that newsletter. We just had a conversation this morning, and the future, again, with that hyper customer focus is, let's just take Pete as an example. Let's say all he cares about maybe is Puerto Vallarta, right? He doesn't really care about Mexican politics. He doesn't really care about, business. He's retired, and he just cares about Puerto Vallarta because he maybe wants to retire there. And so we want to offer that customization in the newsletter of saying, okay, we'll just give you the articles we write on Puerto Vallarta, right? So that degree of customization in the newsletter is where we're headed next. And everybody's feeling fatigue on everything. I think social media has managed to make us fatigue, not just on our phones or to read, but just
Mm,
in life, just
yeah.
because there's never a down moment. And so, we just have to be very cognizant of that reality of humanity and make sure we're giving people exactly what they want and no
You know,
more.
it's Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if this is a trend or not, but I turned off notifications to all my social channels some time ago because I was miserable and I became a happier person, like much
And
happier. And
I don't
and I
have
try,
notifications, but,
yeah.
something interesting happened at the start of this year. We have a 26-year-old lady in our office, and I sent her something on Instagram at the start of the year, and I came in the office and I said, "Did you see it?" And she said, "At the start of the year, I deleted Instagram." This
Mm,
is a 26-year-old girl who you'd say she's in the
mm,
target market for social media. And so I
Mm,
do believe there is an increasing trend, not by everybody, but by an increasingly large segment of the population saying there are some benefits of social media, but the negatives are just too much.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and obviously we want to be there to still be able to inform, inspire, and entertain people when that happens. When people say, I just can't, I don't want the baggage that comes with social media.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I think you're completely right. Just from having 2 kids myself, like, they are really aware of how bad it can be. So they're super cautious. They use it, very privately amongst friends, and they don't, they really try not to get sucked into all the nonsense that's out there.
Yeah.
It's not 100% for sure. And doom scrolling is still a thing. And I think for my teenager, I think it's shopping scrolling.
Yeah.
It's like fashion
Exactly.
fashion scrolling.
Exactly.
But he's aware of his problem.
That's good. That's step one.
Anyway, all right. So, okay. So we talked a little bit about newsletters. You have niche like city-based newsletters that folks can
Mhm.
opt into. You're sending newsletters. I know every day, maybe twice a day.
Yeah.
There's a lot newsletters going out, which is, in my opinion, the number one direct marketing tool for publishers. Very, very
Yeah.
important. Now, one thing that we skipped over a little bit is how folks get on the newsletter. They hit the site. You mentioned they get 1 or 2 articles, and then can they optionally opt in, or is it required opt in order
Well, I mean,
to?
you can read an article, and then if you want to read the second one, it asks you to sign up for the newsletter, and that allows you to read the second one. And then if you
Right.
want to read the third one, you've got to pay. That's every 30 days. So we've
Yep.
tightened that up
Mm,
over the time we've owned it. We've tightened up that paywall, um, because it's just if you give people too much, they're gonna. So we
mhm.
we tightened it up, and I think even where we're at today is still somewhat generous. I mean, I go to some, large newspapers at Chicago Tribune. I mean, it's like they won't even let you read one article. That
Wow.
wall is right there. So
Right.
that's where
Right.
we've settled in right now.
We have a lot of publishers that are very nervous about putting a registration wall up and restricting access. So they're like playing around with just a few articles and leaving most of their content open. But I think your registration wall sits on the entire
Yes.
content base. And when you say tighten it up, that means like giving away less free articles, requiring an email before getting to the content. What happened when you tightened it up? Like,
I
did you
mean,
notice a difference?
no, I mean, no one. I mean, we saw more. We didn't. We've only seen an increasing amount of new subscribers, right? As
Mm,
we've tightened it up. So we went through that as well. Should we? Shouldn't we? Are we going to lose people? Are we going to get less
mm,
traffic? I mean, we
mm,
agonized over all of that. But again, I mean, you go back to the previous things I said. If you're going to get tough on your paywall, you better not be annoying them with ads. You better have awesome content. You
yeah.
better not have people reading your content and wondering, is this paid sponsored content or is this real? If all that starts entering in, it's not, I believe it's not going to work. So you got to get those pieces in place, and then you can get tougher on the paywall. The other thing is obviously social media has trained everyone that everything's free, right? And so, it's something you got to kind of retrain people. No, if you want quality, if you don't want ads, if you want to trust, if you want to make sure that's not AI, there's a price to that. And some people get that and a lot of people don't. But that's where we're at on this.
Well said. I love it. Okay. Last content piece on the success side. So you started something called MND Kids, which is
Yes.
which is a really fascinating content experiment, I think. It's new, and you're taking your existing content and you're leveraging it by helping people learn Spanish, right? Or kids learn Spanish. Can you tell us more about
Yeah,
that?
sure. So, I talked about our mission before, but it's mostly focused on adults, right? And so we started getting more and more feedback from friends and family, and even some people in the educational space saying, "Why don't you guys do something for kids?" And they said, not only is it interesting to have short form nonfiction content for kids, which schools told us they needed more of, But also you guys can do it in Spanish and English. Also, you can reinforce the importance of news. Also, you can reinforce the fact that it's not politically biased. Also, you can reinforce with teachers, how to look for AI. And then you can also reinforce Mexico to kids as well, right? Unfortunately, as I said, a lot of adults in the United States, Canada, and beyond have been trained by the media that Mexico is a dangerous, bad place if you leave your all-inclusive hotel in Cancun. And so we felt like it would be a nice extension of our mission to be able to offer kids real quality news and information about the country so they don't grow up with those same misperceptions as well. And so we've got this going in schools in both Mexico and the United States. If anyone listening to this is aware of a school district that would be interested in something like this. But as Pete said, basically what we do is we take one of our articles a day from our main site. This is set up as a separate site. And we rewrite, first of all, we select an article that kids will be interested in. And then if you go down a little bit more, Pete, what we allow is you can choose to read the article in Spanish or in English. And you can also then choose level 1, 2, or 3.
Back up to this article we're looking at on
Sure.
MND Kids.
So
Yep.
the child can select whatever article they're interested in, whether it's a culture one or about pyramids or about food or about sports. And they can select whether they want to read the article in Spanish or English. And then they can also select whether their reading level is, elementary, middle, or high school. And the article appears in the right language, written at the right level with some discussion questions and things like that. So we're just getting started with it. It is being used in schools in Mexico and the US. And we think it's going to be a great, great tool because really, it's more important than ever for the U.S. and Mexico, or the U.S., Mexico, and Canada to be friends. And it doesn't feel like our politicians are enabling and fostering that right now sometimes, but it is important. And so it would be sad to leave the next generation with a legacy of distrust about your neighbors. And so, we're trying to change that with what we have and hopefully leave a legacy of curiosity and not being naive about our neighbors.
That's a great mission. I love it. And just if you're listening to this, the takeaway here is look at your publication, look at what you're producing content wise, and see if you can repurpose your existing content in another way. Because I think what Travis has done here for Mexico News Daily is really a stroke of genius to take the content that already exists and use it in an educational way to learn Spanish. It's really pretty
It felt
fantastic.
like a very logical, but also very important extension that we
Yeah,
could do of our content for kids.
I love it. I love it. All right. Now, tell me about your podcast. You're running a podcast. You're a publisher. What's going on here?
In the interest of filling every second of every day, um, since we bought Mexico News Daily, we've been approached constantly about a podcast. So people always look me up and say, "Hey, I can do a podcast for you guys." And I was really, I would always say, I don't know if the world needs another podcast, right? I mean, there's zillions of them. And the other thing we were worried about was really protecting our brand, right? We didn't want to just have, I mean, if somebody said, I'm an expert on Mexican politics, that's not what we're trying to do. Or if someone was like, I've been an expat here for 10 years and I can tell you the bottom line of this country, that's a little bit dangerous as well. So we said no over and over and over again when we got those pitches. But ultimately, just recently, we settled in on what I think is the right sort of topic. And what the podcast is called is Confidently Wrong. So part of the name came from the fact that my wife always calls me a confidently wrong person about directions, or about, where I think the restaurant is or something.
That's a guy thing.
It
Yeah.
is. For
Yeah.
sure. So we're actually gonna get merchandise made up that says, "My husband is confidently wrong," and then at the
I'm
Mexican
in.
daily.
Sign me up.
We're gonna do that, but it's really consistent with our brand in the sense that so many people are confidently wrong about Mexico, right? Can I drink the water? Is it safe? Can I drive there? Is Mexico City, a hellhole or a wonderful place? And
Oh,
so we base it on our written content, and we educate ourselves on our content. And then what we do is we have a podcast each week for about 30 minutes where we pick one topic and review some of the confidently wrong things we've seen and heard from others or on social media. And we talk about them in the podcast. Just to use like water as an example, right? If you tell
oh,
someone you're going to Mexico, to this day, people say, don't drink the water, or
oh.
don't touch the ice or don't eat lettuce. And there's just so much confidently wrong information out there that we
Mm.
started a podcast called Confidently Wrong by Mexico News Daily.
It's awesome. I love it. It's almost like a FAQ for the country in a
Yeah,
funny way,
yeah,
right? And then so if you're interested in Mexico, it's like, and yeah, like you said, if someone's considering moving there, you're probably on the search for as much information as you can get about what's the quality of life actually,
yeah.
there.
So
So
it's not
that
meant to be, a promotional, piece for Mexico. It's meant, again, just like our website, to inform and educate people.
yeah,
And so check it out. We have a YouTube channel called Mexico News Daily TV. And then we also have, it's also on Spotify. So check that out. We do have a
awesome.
website where we put, sorry, in the YouTube channel, we do cover some of our news articles as well. So
Okay.
check that out.
We'll put those in the show notes for sure. All
Cool.
right, so we're kind of getting to the end here. Just want to wrap up with a couple of questions,
Okay.
and that I've written down. So here's one: what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you bought Mexico News Daily? Is there something that you
Of
learned
course.
along the
You don't
way
even
that
need to
you
ask
that
it. I could, yeah,
is there
absolutely.
is there one thing that you were absolutely sure about when you started that today you're like, yeah, you know what, I was confidently wrong?
For sure. First of all, there's many, but one I would share is, and I guess I should have known this from the name, but when it's daily, that means every single day. And so, um, we do publish new content 365 days a year.
Mm,
We probably don't have to, but we're just committed to it. And
mm,
so that does mean every single day we've got stuff going on.
mm,
And when you're part of a big company and there's, lots of overlap of responsibilities, that's one thing. But when it's a smaller business, it's intense. And I don't mind the intensity. I actually like it, but it's been very intense. I guess the other thing I would say I grossly underestimated was just how precarious and dangerous and important the back office is, right? So
mm,
everything from your server to your paywall to everything in between, your hosting, I don't have experience in that area. And so it's hard as a small company to get all that right. We have tens of thousands of people every day hitting our site. And there's it's constantly changing. And we had a cyber attack recently, and
mm.
it's just it's that part,
Right.
you never can totally relax because there's always something that could happen. And again,
Mm,
we're a site that is people are looking at 24/7. So it's not easy for us to just say, oh, for a day, the site isn't live. That's our bread and butter.
in dovetail with that, what would you say your best failure was in this journey, and what did you learn from that failure? Do you have anything that particularly stands out where you went a direction, crashed into the wall, and then, oh, wait, no, that was wrong. This is what I learned. Anything
Yeah, I would
specific?
say our best failure. Wow, I wasn't ready for that question. I
Yeah.
mean, we've made a lot, right? So, um again, I think we underestimated the importance of some of those people in that back office area. And, at the beginning, we trusted some people that were, legacy from the previous owner. And, that turned out to be a failure. And we
Mm,
had to make decisions, basically got rid of those people and
mm,
had to bring in new people. So I think just the people side of things, we had, again, being a smaller business, you really count on some key people. And, and I think, again, because we're not from this industry, we probably relied on some of those key people and held on to them too long instead of just making the change. And so we've made, a lot of changes in the team to make sure they're aligned with what we're trying to do and what the mission is, and get along with everybody else on the team.
that's awesome. Yeah, you gotta make the change when you need to make the change. It's hard, but you
Yeah.
do have to do it. Well, I was going to ask you what's next for Mexico News Daily, but we talked a lot about what's next
We
with,
got a lot going on.
yeah, yeah. So, just going to wrap up. Where can people reach you? Where can they get the news, and where can they get the kids and the podcast? Can you
Sure.
repeat
Well, I
that?
mean, hopefully, if you go in Google and write Mexico News, we'll come up first. But mexiconewsdaily.com is our site. MND, so Mexico News Daily, MNDkids.com is our kids site. And our YouTube site is Mexico News Daily TV. So would love to have you check us out. And what I tell people always is, um, if you're tired and fatigued and depressed with the news in your home country, it's not necessarily like that everywhere. And there's a lot of wonderful things and inspiring things happening in a country like Mexico. And so, you may say, the last thing I want to do is read news about another country, but you may actually find it, and many of our readers do find it inspiring to read about good things going on in this country. So check us out.
That's great. Travis, thank you so much. This was super fun. And
Thank you for having me.
let's do it again.
Great.
Stay warm in the South.
Thank you, Pete. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Paywall Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch to discuss subscription strategy, go to leakypaywall.com. See you next time.